Well, I appreciate the board inviting me out to speak today. It's really timely for the topic of broadband in North Carolina. And thanks for the extra time because I could definitely use it. I have a lot to say. So appreciate it. Joseph, you were just looking out for me. All right, appreciate it. Well, my name is Ben Shelton. I work for the North Carolina Center for Geographic Information Analysis. We are, kind of a central GIS shop for the state. We handle the coordinating council. If you're not familiar with it, please look at our website, the GICC. We're always interested in new participants coming in and participating in that. So feel free to reach out to us on that. But I'm here to speak today about broadband data and broadband mapping in general and how we're trying to strive for a more granular picture of broadband availability in the state, especially with the emphasis behind everything that we went through the last couple of years. There's a renewed focus and attention on broadband and availability, making sure it's available to everyone, because if you've tried to apply to a job or do anything in our economy these days, everything's related to broadband, and it makes it much more difficult when you don't have that access. There we go. So CGIA for several years has supported the Broadband Infrastructure Office. It's a sister agency within the Department of Information Technology. They are tasked with expanding broadband availability across the state, making it available and accessible. Now, with the renewed focus the last couple of years, they've now been rolled into a new division of broadband within DIT. And so that division kind of has two parts. We have the availability, the infrastructure group, bio office, as we call them. And there's also the Office of Digital Equity. One sec. All right. There's also the Office of Digital Equity and Literacy. It's a new group within DIT that's really focused on, as this infrastructure is rolled out, made available to more people, making sure that that's done in an equitable fashion so that there's, not any new digital redlining, as it's called, where certain income groups or certain demographics are not being served the same as other groups. And they're also looking at expanding the skill sets necessary to leverage these new platforms and applications. And so here's a list of just a quick thing of what their focus areas are. I did try to get Stephanie Jane Edwards to come with me. She wasn't able to come today, but she is the new broadband data and mapping lead for the bio office. So we're still supporting them. We're still assisting them. But with all the focus, we just need as much help as we can get. Stephanie Jane comes to us with a lot of experience. She's been in the broadband industry for a long time in the state previously, and then for MCNC. So she just brings a whole breadth of knowledge that just kind of supplements my kind of GIS nerdy mapping skills. So she's also a mapper and a GIS expert. So I think it's a good match. So typically in the past, what we've done is we've received data from the FCC. It's called the FCC Form 477 data. And this is provider reported data. So every internet service provider has to report to the FCC where they provide service, at what level, what technology they're deploying, things like that. But in the past, it's all been done at a census block level, which creates a lot of issues. I think one senator at the US level said the broadband maps suck, which I kind of agree with. And that's what we've just been given, and that's the hand we've been dealt with for several years now. They are improving the mapping, and it is getting more granular down to a household level. It's just taking some time, and we're in the process of receiving the first iterations of that data over the next few months. But this is the maps that we've typically been relying on. So if one household in a census block is receiving service at a certain level, that whole census block is reported as having that service, which, as you can imagine, really over-reports service. It makes the broadband providers look good, but it's not actually useful when you're trying to make policy and make decisions to expand service, because you don't know where those households and businesses that don't have the service are located, and that makes it really difficult. So you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot by overstating this coverage. So this map, just even with that reporting, shows there's still hundreds of thousands of households that do not have adequate service at different thresholds. As you can see in this map, we use the 25 megabytes per second download and 3 megabytes per second upload as kind of a baseline for adequate broadband. And the FCC has used that for years. It's kind of moving towards, because through the pandemic and through all of the telehealth video conferencing, online schooling, all the uses of it, 25.3 is really not adequate enough, we're finding. So now it's kind of evolving into a newer threshold. It's 100 megabytes per second download and 20 megabytes per second upload. And even that's still underperforming. So it's really, you need a symmetrical service is what we're looking for, 100 up, 100 down at a minimum. Because that upload, when you're doing video chatting and things like that, doing online schooling, you need the upload speeds as well as the download speeds. You're not just receiving data, you're also putting data out. And so this map shows there's lots of pockets, especially out in the West, especially out in the Northeast. That's where we know there are issues, but we also know there's a lot of underreported areas. There we go. One way here in North Carolina, how we're trying to supplement that FCC data is through our North Carolina broadband survey. This survey, you can see it if you go to NC One Map, there's links to this survey. If you go to the Broadband Infrastructure Office website, you can also get to that survey. So in this survey, you can go on, you can take speed tests, answer some questions to give context about your service. And then that way we can look at where are some of the reported areas that people are saying they don't have service, even if the FCC data is showing that they do have service. And so this kind of supplements that FCC mapping effort. And as you can probably understand, if you don't have internet, you can't take an online survey. So there's also a phone option that's available. People can call in and provide their location information and report that they don't have service at their location. We wanted to, provide all of that. And this is done with, in partnership with NC State University's Friday Institute. They put together the survey and host it, and then we kind of have scripts that pull this data and put this on NC One Map. And this data is also available if you're doing local planning, county planning, you can go on and pull this survey down. If you want the full list of questions behind it, we do strip some of the identifying information out, but we can work with you to get that information. So, and this map is current. So we have over 90,000 responses currently, and it kind of fluctuates, but as we push this out more, as the FCC data is coming down and we start to have some processes to challenge the FCC data, as I'll get into a little later, the survey data is definitely timely. So since 2018, CGIA and the Broadband Office has run something called the Growing Rural Economies with Access to Technology, the GREAT Grant program. So this is a state appropriated program that has allocated over $50 million over those 3 years to expand broadband infrastructure. These are kind of provider and state-run grants. So a provider can go into an area, apply for specific areas, then it's vetted by the office. There's a whole protest process, and then those awards were made in those counties that you can see in this map. So throughout that time, we had $50 million awarded to serve, if you can see it, it's over 35,000 households that got expanded service through that program. But now, $50 million over 3 years, then the pandemic hits and everybody goes, oh, internet's important. We need to fund these things. And so the American Rescue Plan Act was enacted in early 2021. Those funds were brought down to the state. The state legislature appropriated $350 million for a new grant program. So we had $50 million over 3 years, and now all of a sudden in one summer, we're supposed to allocate $350 million. And so as you can imagine, that's a big task. We put this out in early this year, I think it's March it opened, and in May we received all the applications, and we got 305 applications covering 460,000 households. And so as you can imagine, we're going from one program that has 30,000 households over 3 years to 460,000 households. Data and knowing where that money is going to go is key and really critical. And what we are lucky enough to do is in North Carolina, we feel very lucky and data rich. And it's mainly because of all of the work at the local county government level. If you've been participating in the Next Gen 911 effort, all of that data is being rolled up to the state. We are able to take the address data from that Next Gen 911 project, and it's being rolled into a project CGIA is managing called Address NC, if you've heard of it. It should be coming live publicly soon, but we were able early this year to get the preliminary data set and use that combined statewide address data set to really use that as the backbone of this program. And then the providers are able to tell us exactly what households they want to serve. We're able to run our whole protest process using the same addresses, comparing apples to apples. And it really just made things a lot easier. If we didn't have that address data, we probably would still be working on it today. But instead, we were able to map that out all in a matter of weeks. So here's a quick look at, so we put this online application out on NC One Map. All the broadband providers were able to go out to this application, look at, we define the eligibility areas based on the legislation, put those into the map. They're able to go out there, circle the addresses right in this application and download it as a CSV and include it in their application materials through our grant portal. So when we got 305 applications, we just got all the address data as CSVs, pulled it into a Postgres database, and were able to map it out with some scripting in the matter of a week. So for 305 applications, it was pretty astounding how quickly we could pull this in because we had that great statewide data set to serve as the backbone. And then using the same interface, legislation, put together requirements that a certain provider, if they serve these locations already, could come in and protest and provide documentation saying, hey, we already serve it at this threshold. This is the technology. Well, using the same address data set and the same application, those protesters were able to circle those points, pull out the CSV, give us those points and those address data sets. And really quickly, you can just overlay those two and say, okay, this is the application data, this is the protest data, here's what's left. So the broadband office did a lot of vetting of the materials and the reporting that the providers were giving us. But, without the data sets that you all helped us create, there would have been no easy way to do this. And we feel very lucky to have that. So with that, we are able to award, I think it was announced at the end of August, over $250 million of that $350 million pot to serve over 100,000 households. And so, as you can tell, that's not 350 million, but they're in the process of getting those contracts in place. Once the contracts are in place, then we can go through and take out all the overlap from the awarded areas and go back to the providers that are in those remaining applications that haven't been funded and see if there's that extra $100 million we can award. So, but for 94 counties and 100,000 households, these have been awarded, and projects and the contracts are just being finalized. So this is all on NC One Map. You can see these locations. You can search by address, see exactly which addresses and which providers in each county. You can filter on the county and see exactly what's going on in your local areas. So here's our NC One Map Broadband Initiative page. This is where everything we do at the state, we try to be transparent and put this data out publicly for everyone's use, as well as for future programs that I'm going to detail here, where there's a little more county-state partnership and it's not just a state-run effort. We want to be able to put out data for everyone to use for your own local planning and your own project areas. And so all of that will be put on NC One Map. The map that I just showed with the awards is embedded right on this map or on this webpage, and you can use it there. One map that we're looking to put out there soon is our Affordable Connectivity Program map. So if you've heard of the Affordable Connectivity Program, it's a FCC run program. They provide a $30 subsidy on people's internet bills. So affordability is probably the #1 thing we hear about. Well, I don't subscribe to internet because it's too expensive. I can't, feed my family and get $70 a month internet service. Well, the Affordable Connectivity Program is trying to address that. It started out through the pandemic as the emergency broadband benefit, and now it's been rolled into this new program that's a little more sustainable, hopefully, into the future. And so we're trying to map those enrollments compared to the eligibility. So there's a long list of eligibility requirements, one of them just being the 200% of the poverty level. So what this map is doing is using that 200% poverty level, comparing the actual number of enrollments in each county, and determining where are those counties that are not enrolling as many people as we believe are eligible. And so anything in red in this map is something that's over 90% of the eligible population has not been enrolled yet. And then the blue kind of teal areas on this map, there are actually providers that have worked with the FCC and have pledged to offer a low income $30 a month plan. And so with that $30 a month plan and the $30 subsidy, it's really free internet service that people could be receiving currently. So we definitely wanted to put this out here to this group and get the word out. And so this is helping right now the Office of Digital Equity and Literacy. They're out there trying to promote the ACP program, get more people enrolled. So if you hear from them, this is the reason why. And like I said, the FCC data is now kind of transforming itself. Hopefully soon we'll be receiving address level specific service data. This is called the Broadband Serviceable Location Fabric, the BSLs. And what they're doing is they're taking, what the FCC did was they took a private vendor, CostQuest, and they have their own location data for addresses, parcels, building footprints, and they've analyzed that to identify those addresses that are serviceable in terms of, it's not a barn, it's not an outbuilding, it's an actual business that could use internet, it's a household, one of those types of locations. And then now the providers are going to be reporting their service at the household level, which will be very useful as we're getting all of this funding coming down to be able to target investments into the correct areas, get a little more granular look at the data. But through this, again, as I keep saying, North Carolina is very lucky. We're in a very good situation to where there are challenge processes for their fabric data. It's a commercial product, so we don't know where the source is coming from, but we, using our own location data at the state, using the data that you've provided to us from the statewide parcel effort or the statewide addresses, and then we're working on getting a statewide building footprint update. With those 3 data sets in North Carolina, we can go out and challenge their fabric and say, where you're missing locations here, you're not reporting the right number of units. There's a long list of challenge categories that you can challenge. So we're setting up the setting up our challenge process so that we can get to the FCC and challenge their data to get them to actually show the locations accurately in North Carolina. So a lot of states don't have these statewide data sets, and we've talked to many of them, and they're really struggling to even get a statewide address data set or get a statewide parcel data set. So they're really having to rely on other commercial products to challenge a different commercial product, whereas we have publicly available data in the state, and we feel very lucky about that. So thank you if you've provided that data up to the state. It's really timely and is going to pay dividends hopefully in the future. And then with the serviceable location fabric availability data, there's a whole nother challenge process that we can use our broadband surveys and other means to challenge that. Okay, we don't believe that this provider is reporting their service correctly, and we can try to correct the FCC map. So I think they'll have like every 6 months a challenge process that we can go back and forth and continually update their fabric data for the locations and for the availability data. So hopefully over time we get a real clear picture of where those locations are that need service and are lacking. And so here's a quick overview of what was in those ARPA dollars that were come from the federal government and then the state legislature put in place, I believe last November in the state budget. So we have almost $1 billion for broadband funding in the state currently, just from the ARPA dollars. There's $380 million, if you add in $30 million they allocated from the capital improvement fund from the state legislature for just Great Grant, which is the state-run program. But there's all these other programs coming down, and one specifically that I want to highlight next is the Completing Access to Broadband, because this is really a state-county partnership to define project areas instead of having provider-defined project areas where they want to run service. This is where we can help define the areas that need service, not the providers, and I'll get into that a little bit. But there's also other programs for, the Making Ready Accelerator. It's a pole replacement fund. So if there's poles out there that are aging or they are just not the right type of poles to handle the new technologies, that $100 million allocated there is available to go out into the communities and get those poles upgraded. And then there's $50 million for awareness and digital literacy. And then also $1 million for broadband mapping. So there's just a lot of moving parts inside the ARPA dollars alone. And so, like I said, the completing access to broadband, what this really is an RFP competitive bid process. And so the states and the counties can work together to define the project area, put that project area into a scope of work and put it out for bid. Just like any other project that, you may have at a county level, put it out to bid, get the providers to bid on it, and then allocate the funds to that provider to expand service to that specific area. So it's turning it on its head a little bit to where it's not a provider-run grant program like the Great Grant Program. It's a state and county local government-run program that we can identify where we want that service to expand. So, it's a really exciting program. So over the next year, this is really going to be a high focus. Once we get through the Great Grant funding, those remaining unfunded eligible locations from the Great Grant could be used to define eligible project areas. Information you may have at a local level could be used to define those project areas. So there's a lot of input that we're seeking and coordination that needs to happen. So we're looking at that. Stephanie Jane Edwards is really going to be leading the effort and the outreach and communication for this. So I definitely recommend reaching out to her if you have questions or want any guidance. And so currently on the broadband website, you can find a few documents out there. There's a guidance document, part 1 of guidance document that's out there currently. They're working on a part 2 now that they're kind of starting to define the RFP templates and things like that need to be used, and how the funds are transferred. Because I think the funding from ARPA also went to the county, and through this CAB program, it's kind of combining the 2 pots of money from the county and the state to define these and fund these projects. So all of that is going to be in those guidance documents. So if you're looking for some information about it, definitely check out their website. We also have a CAB planning tool already on NC1 map. We're starting to define what the FCC is showing as the unserved and underserved areas in the state. As we get the more granular data and work out the licensing restrictions behind the FCC's new data, we're going to try to make those available out there on that CAB planning tool to kind of define where those areas that are unserved are. So if there's additional information, here's the link. If you need the link and you don't want to write it down right now, I will send it to you. Just email me or email Stephanie Jane Edwards, and we'll get that information out to you. And definitely check out the CAB grant program site on the Broadband Infrastructure Office website. It has a lot of information. And here's where our targets are. So this was kind of set by the governor. The numbers on the right, NC 2025. These are the numbers that we're trying to hit in terms of making broadband expanded out into the communities around the state. So as you can see, they're ambitious goals, especially when you consider the numbers on the left, NC today, are way overstated. So we're trying to take what the real numbers are and get to those numbers on the right, not really what are in this light blue, because we know the FCC data that was used to make the 95% number right there is definitely wrong. Is way overstating the availability across the state. So we know that we have a huge gap to make up, in a little time. But with all the infrastructure focus nowadays and the funding coming from the federal government through the ARPA dollars, we feel like it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to reach those goals. It's really equated to the Rural Electrification Authority that was, back in the 1930s. But back then we were dealing with public utilities and one technology to get electricity out to these rural communities. We're dealing with dozens of technologies and proprietary information and private companies doing the actual running. So it's a little more complicated than it was back in the 30s. So we have a template, but we want to have to tweak it to the modern challenges. And so here's our information. Stephanie Jane Edwards and myself, we're both here to help anyone who has questions, who's running projects at their local areas, who need assistance, need data, just want to talk about it. It's a complex issue. Defining the project areas for that CAB program is really our next challenge that we're trying to tackle, as well as our challenge process for the FCC. So if you want to be involved in that challenge process, get in touch with us. We'll work with you to see how to get the data. We as a state are entering into a license to get that proprietary data from the FCC. That's more address level availability data. We can work with you if you want to try to get access as well. There's, processes that you can go through with the FCC to get your own copy of the data. But definitely keep in touch. We're going to have to, all hands on deck to tackle this. What I didn't mention, so we've been focusing on the ARPA dollars, and we have almost $1 billion coming from that. We haven't even touched the infrastructure bill that was also passed earlier, or this time in 2021, the infrastructure bill was passed at the federal level. Those funds still have not made it down to the state. That's going to be upwards to another $1 billion that we'll receive for broadband expansion in the state. So over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to be hearing a lot about broadband and the funding and making sure that this once in a lifetime investment's put into the right places and expanded as best as we can. And all of this is run by GIS data and location data, knowing where that investment's going, tracking the build outs, tracking the improvements is all critical to making sure that that money is not wasted and the opportunity is not missed. So North Carolina, we feel like we're in a great spot compared to a lot of states because we have such a great community in the state that is working so hard and diligently. So if you provided data to us, or if you want to work with us, we appreciate it. So thank you. Any questions? Yes. Yeah, I will. Okay, I'll try. Don't make it too long. I don't have a good memory. Mhm. Right. So the question was, the Great Grant Program, was it focused on just households or private households? Was it businesses as well? It was households and businesses. Schools and libraries and things like that, those are considered community anchor institutions. And typically those are well served throughout the state. So the Great Grant Program really focused on households and businesses. Every application, there was a whole scoring criteria once they received the applications, and it was partly how many businesses you're trying to serve, how many private households there are, how unserved was the area. And there's a whole list of criteria that went into that scoring, but households and businesses were the primary focus.